Israel is pushing on with its military operation in Rafah in defiance of international condemnation and an order from the International Court of Justice. It struck the Al-Mawasi camp in the south of Gaza on Tuesday. The Hamas-run health ministry says at least 21 people were killed in the area designated by Israel as a humanitarian zone. The Israeli army denied hitting the area, adding that it is targeting Hamas militants. There are also reports of Israeli tanks in the center of Rafah. This after 45 Palestinians were reportedly killed in a separate strike on a refugee camp on Sunday. Israel's prime minister called it a tragic mistake. And we can now bring in Sam Rose. He's the director of planning at UNRWA and joins us from Rafah now. Sam, you're on the line there with us. We're getting reports that Israeli forces have reached the heart of Rafah. What can you tell us about the situation there?
Absolutely. Look, we thought the situation was bad yesterday when the horrific incident involving the strikes on a tented camp inside Rafah took place. But over the past 24 hours, bombardments have continued, they've intensified, and we understand from our staff and other people on the ground that indeed Israeli troops have pushed further into the center of Rafah. I've not seen them myself, but those are the reports that we're hearing. What I can tell you without any doubt is that the bombardments have intensified in areas to the west of Rafah, including on the coast where I am right now.
Mm-hmm. Gazan officials say more than 20 people have been killed in an Israeli strike on a displacement camp near Rafah today. Do you have any independent information to support that claim?
I don't know. I mean, I'm in my residence. It's dark now, so we're not able to go out. I've heard the same stories. I've heard the same reports. It certainly wouldn't surprise me if they were true, given the bombardments that we're hearing. But no, I can't independently verify it at this time.
Mm-hmm. Now, knowing what you know, is there any place left in Gaza that is safe?
No, absolutely not. We've been saying this, and it's become a bit of a cliche over the past 8 months, but it's a death sentence for Palestinians who are constantly forcibly displaced from one location to another location to another location. We've lost count of how many times many of our staff members have been displaced. The women, children, the civilians horrifically killed in the incident a couple of nights ago had been forcibly displaced from other parts of Gaza. They were in a tented camp that they believed to be safe, but like many people in Gaza, they go to bed every night under the stars, not sure whether or not they're going to wake up in the morning.
We're almost 8 months into this war. Much, if not most, of Gaza, you know the situation a lot better than we can grasp it here, has been reduced to rubble. You know, hundreds of thousands, you mentioned it there, have been displaced over and over again. You've been in touch with people there. You've been trying to provide aid for them. What's the most common questions you get when you talk to Gazans who are trapped there?
I mean, people say all sorts of things. A few weeks ago, when we go to the north of Gaza, people would want food. But the most common refrain that we hear from everyone is just stop the war, stop the war, stop the war. The people of Gaza can't understand why or how the world can witness every day what's happening to them. These scenes of bloodshed and horror and brutality being played out on mobile phones, media and social media around the world. They can't understand how the world can see this going on and yet is powerless or unable to do anything about it. So they feel a real sense of abandonment from the international community and a real sense of hopelessness for their situation.
Is there anything you can tell them to provide some sort of comfort when they come to you with that kind of, desperation?
No, I mean, we can provide some kind of succor on a very human level, on an individual level. We spend a lot of time talking to our staff members. They perk us up, that we perk them up, but all that we can do when people come to us in those situations is be very human with them and give them a bit of human contact, reassure them that we do care, that the world does care. But in terms of material support, in terms of real assistance, no, we're powerless to stop that, and we're very regretful the fact that we do appear to be powerless to stop this. So the people of Gaza, I'm a representative of the United Nations. My organisation is a United Nations organisation, and people struggle to understand how it is that the United Nations, this famed and this acclaimed and this important and austere international body, appears completely powerless in the face of such a brutal conflict that's grabbing the attention of the world, but is such a small geographic space.
Yeah. That was Sam Rose, Director of Planning at UNRWA. Thank you so much for your time, and please be safe.
Thank you.
During a state visit between France and Germany in Meseberg, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz weighed in on Israel's offensive in Rafah.
Israel needs to abide by international law. It needs to allow humanitarian support for the people suffering in Gaza. It's the responsibility of Israel to ensure that necessary aid is delivered. Yesterday, we heard of a terrible, tragic attack in Rafah. A refugee camp was hit. Many people died. This case shows once again why Germany and so many other states have been against a major ground offensive in Rafah, because there isn't sufficient protection of civilians. And it's not possible. Yesterday's incident clearly shows this.
Well, French President Emmanuel Macron also reacted to the recent attacks by Israel in Rafah.
The situation in Rafah is extremely worrying. And as I already said yesterday, the Israeli operations in Rafah must end. We must stand by Palestinian civilians. The International Court of Justice has already called on Israel to stop its operation in Rafah immediately to protect civilians. Our position has been clear right from the start. We have condemned in the strongest possible terms the Hamas attacks. We support Israel's right to defend itself, but we need to ensure its response in Gaza is in line with international law.
DW correspondent in Jerusalem, Rebecca Ritter, is following the developments for us. Rebecca, what can you tell us about the situation in Rafah right now?
Well, Anya, we know that the Israeli military continued their operation in Rafah overnight, as well as along the Adelphi corridor. That's a scrap of land between Egypt and Gaza, and it's a key position for the Israelis. We also had reports in the early hours this morning that airstrikes had begun in the Rafah area, and we also had reports this afternoon that airstrikes were also targeting the Al-Mawasi area. It's west of Rafah. And it's where many civilians have gone to take shelter. We were hearing from the Gazan Health Ministry, reports of around 20 dead, though we have not obviously been able to confirm those numbers, and we've heard no word from the Israeli military on that latest strike. We do know, as you were saying in your lead, and we have been getting reports also of tanks in the centre of Rafah. So we also haven't heard from the Israeli military on that point, but we've been getting eyewitness accounts of tanks in the centre of Rafah, and we've seen some images from the Al Jazeera network that appear to show or alleged to show these tanks reportedly in the centre of the city. Now, the question regarding that is, of course, going to be around whether or not tanks in the centre of Rafah constitutes what's known as a full-scale incursion of that city, and that's something that was a red line by the US prior to the attack on Rafah. That's something that they said that they wouldn't get behind, that they wouldn't support, and they urged Israel to go for these more targeted and smaller operations. So whether or not the position from the US will change now, of course, is a big question on the lips of many.
Now, the Israeli military has given an update on its investigation into the airstrike on Rafah on Sunday. More than 40 civilians were killed in that. What did the Israeli military say in that update?
Yeah, well, a little while ago we heard from the senior military spokesman, Daniel Hagari. He came out with information from a preliminary investigation. He said that, in fact, this strike was carried out 1.7 kilometres from the so-called safe zone. There was conjecture and questions as to whether or not this strike that happened on Sunday, sparking this huge fire and killing, as you say, more than 40 people, was within that designated safe area. Now, he says that this preliminary investigation proves that it wasn't. He said that small munitions were used, the smallest that they're able to fire from these jets were used, and that those munitions were not able or wouldn't have been able to spark the kind of fire that we saw in the aftermath. So suggesting that the strike potentially led to something else exploding and then sparking that fire that we saw. He suggested, or he said as one of the possible options might be that there was a Hamas weapons depot nearby and perhaps that caught fire, though they offered no evidence for that, and they said the investigation, of course, is ongoing.
Rebecca Ritter's reporting from Jerusalem. Rebecca, thank you so much.
Now, U.S. President Joe Biden had previously said that attacks on populated areas in Rafah would be a red line for him. I asked Ian Bremmer, president of the U.S.-based political risk consultancy Eurasia Group, if that red line had been crossed.
It's pretty clear that red line is being routinely crossed, even if not as soundly or strongly as Prime Minister Netanyahu had said it would. And the point is that the United States isn't doing very much about it. This is America's most important ally in the Middle East. Biden has both privately and publicly warned the Prime Minister and the entire war cabinet in Israel to support a two-state solution. They refuse it. To allow more humanitarian aid in, they've refused it. To be much more careful about the civilian casualties that they are allowing, even if they're not directly targeting. They've refused to do that. And now we see them proceeding with these bombings into Rafah. And whether or not the Prime Minister refers to it as a mistake, the point is that the United States looks incredibly weak in being incapable of restraining its much less powerful and long-standing ally, the Israelis.
Well, what are Biden's options at this point? Biden had threatened to suspend weapons deliveries to Israel. Do you see a scenario emerging where the U.S. would actually cut back support to its ally?
There have been some suspensions of military shipments. We've seen a little bit of that. It certainly would not be in any circumstance cutting off the majority of Israeli defensive aid. That's well over $3 billion a year, in addition to the over $10 billion that was just approved in the recent bipartisan legislative aid and support bill. I don't see any of that. I see the possibility of cutting off some offensive weaponry for a period of time. It certainly would not make Biden's Democratic supporters feel like he was pressuring or constraining Israel. Meanwhile, it makes the Republicans and, of course, former President Trump be able to say that he's not being the strong, strident ally to Israel that he should be. Biden is in no man's land on this issue. He's making nobody happy. And this is, of course, only a few months before a general election in the United States.
Right. Where do you see the risks in that election that is just looming, as you say?
Well, I mean, the risks for the Middle East are that the United States is not seen as an effective actor on the ground, is not able to push forward policies that its Gulf allies certainly want. I mean, Biden has spent a lot of time trying to get an agreement with the Saudis that's all but inked, but you have to have a two-state solution that the Israeli government, again, America's top ally, refuses to support. Now, if Trump comes in and is president, he's going to be just as pro-Zionist as Biden. But it's hard to imagine in this environment that any American president is going to be effective in bringing this war to an end.